My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask you pardon for my sins and the grace to make these moments of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Well, I almost felt a little bit weird, Jesus, when I read what was going to be the topic of my prayer today, when I read the day's Gospel, because logically enough, most of the Gospel scenes have you at their center, or at the very least there. You're inevitably going to be the protagonist, the one whom we actually try to contemplate, the one we're really trying to get to know. I mean, even if it's one of your parables, you might not be there within the parable, but it comes from you. It's part of your teaching. It explains you. It's part of how we get to know you. So when I get to a gospel scene like today where you're not present, not physically, it almost feels a bit strange, right? Indeed, here we are today and you're nowhere to be seen. In fact, the person we're looking at is someone you don't actually even meet until much later in your life, right towards the end of your life, at least the earthly part, when that life of yours had just a few hours remaining in it. And meeting him wasn't exactly fruitful for you either. St. John the Baptist knew this character well enough, and likewise, it wasn't very beneficial for him. So today we end up contemplating Herod the Tetrarch, or as he's otherwise called, Herod the King. Tetrarch for sure was powerful enough, but king he was not. Maybe he just liked to be called a king, I don't know, who knows. But with money enough, he built himself a principal town and named it Tiberias, in honor of his patron, the then Roman emperor. And he had it populated with non-Jews, making it something of a pagan landmark. And that, right there on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, right in your home turf, Lord, which was the region of which he was Tetrarch. It was no surprise then that he had heard of you. And so the Gospel tells us, Herod the Tetrarch had heard about all that was being done by Jesus, and he was puzzled, because some people were saying that John had risen from the dead, others that Elijah had reappeared, still others that one of the ancient prophets had come back to life. But Herod said, John, I beheaded him. So who is this I hear such reports about? And he was anxious to see Jesus. And as soon as I begin to contemplate that man, Lord, to picture him, to consider him, I can't help but think of so many souls who have heard of you, but don't really know you. There are too many of those people. I used to be one of them. I'd heard of you, like so many others, but didn't actually know anything. Certainly didn't know you. Really, there are so many who have heard of you. They know something about you, but they don't know someone, you. Even us Catholics can be like that, of course. There are plenty who go to Mass on Sundays, more or less, and think they're doing enough. Well, they are, I suppose, doing enough to get to heaven at least, but not enough to be happy. Here enters that great tension of Herod the Tetrarch, because when a person is not that distant from you, but not that close to you, just at the threshold, when they know you're active in their region, but they don't yet know you, when that happens, people tend to experience what Herod did. Because you, Lord, are undeniably a person who is somehow insatiably attractive and yet disconcertingly uncertain. Because one can't help but realize that even though this phenomenon draws my attention, even draws my soul, it's also going to affect it. How much that must have troubled a wealthy and powerful man like Herod, who could never shake his conscience from what was truly good and the bad that he had done, and never could have shaken that, not with even all the money and all the power in the world. That's the amazing effect that you have on the soul of everyone, of anyone who begins to sense your presence. You and those who follow you, as also was the case for St. John the Baptist, before the same Herod the Tetrarch. It still happens the same way today. I remember years ago, when I was, let's say, in the process of converting. You remember those times, Lord, when I had started to believe in you, but I was trying to figure out if I should be a Protestant or a Catholic, and I was going to a few things of both. I met that Protestant fellow, a guy who was, let's just say, was pretty passionate about teaching people to evangelize. And, well, I don't even remember what his message was exactly. He had some particular nuance of the gospel that he wanted people to proclaim. Well, of course, with really good spirit, amazingly good spirit, I think he's a wonderful man. But one thing that sticks in my mind is him talking about a particular experience he had. Because he moved in circles that were very different to mine. Was just a very normal kind of person. He moved sometimes with what we might call the rich and famous of the world. And he became known in the music industry. He was a bit of a small-time player in the music industry. But he became known, sure enough, as someone who had converted, someone who had gone Christian, or whatever you want to call it. People knew that, and somehow or other he seemed to be less and less involved with the rock and roll industry. But I remember him telling me so much about that occasion where he never gave me the name. But it was good that he didn't. He wanted to protect that person's conscience, their privacy. But he said that backstage one day at a major event, one of the biggest names in rock and roll came up to him. Again, he didn't say who it was. One of the biggest names in rock and roll came up to him and hugged him with tears in his eyes, crying to him. Jesus asked me to follow him too. And I said no. Wow. Yeah, we find it easy to idolize the famous and the rich, and especially those both famous and rich. But they also have souls. Souls that don't get seen in photos and film, and which are all too easily stained, even destroyed, by being the object of too many photos and too much film, and simply being in possession of so much cash. It's not even like they run their soul through that mink grinder while having the time of their life, the kind of blissful joy that we all wish they had. They suffer too. They suffer, but hidden where the cameras don't see, and in such a way that the cash can't fix it. Pleasure, for sure. Money can certainly buy that. And fame, yeah, that undeniably has its attraction too. But pleasure and fame will never amount to happiness, even though certain forms of media make it look like they do. I just think about how many people like that have tragically, all too tragically, ended up dead, all too young, all too often, at the end of a bottle, or an overdose, or at their own hands. And none of that spells happiness, no matter how much a person might smile in front of a camera. Well, we can just think about the way that we make ourselves look when posting a photo, right? Especially taking a selfie with friends. Always smiling, always getting the right angle, taking 27 different photos in order to get it to look exactly the right way before applying a few filters. Always smiling and looking fantastic in that photo, but not necessarily feeling that way on the inside. Well, fame and fortune doesn't make that dilemma easier, but worse. No, I pray for them, as I also pity them. And I realize how swiftly I would have fallen in that trap if the option had ever been there for me. I'm most definitely no better than anyone like that. But let's come back to Herod again. A different point when he sees Jesus much later, during his last hours. that Herod the not king, or the pseudo-king, or the fake king, stands before the one true king, the one with an eternal and limitless kingdom, and equally limitless power. But it seems he doesn't understand. He can't at that point, I suspect. I know, Lord, it's not that you didn't want to show him, but I fear that at that point, that poor rich man no longer wanted to see. So let's pray for those souls who sense Jesus at the threshold of their life, both the rich and the famous and the normal, the ordinary person just like you and me, the one who wants to let go of all the confusion and anxiety that Herod suffered and have the peace of truth and true happiness to boot. And Mother Mary, help us to help souls embrace that encounter with your Son, as surely as he never tires of drawing closer to them. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations which you've communicated to me in this time of prayer. I ask your assistance in putting them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.